Welcome to Revenge Report. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let's dive in. I was halfway through my chicken breast and mashed potatoes when I heard Paul laugh. That sharp, smug laugh I hadn't missed since the last holiday disaster at Mom's. "There she is," he said loud enough for the table next to us to glance over. "Come on, Grace. You still running story time like it's life or death?" I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. "My name is Grace Delaney. I'm 37 years old. I live in Oak Park, right outside Chicago. I'm a librarian, not the quiet, sweater-wearing stereotype people imagine. I run teen programs on the West Side. Real kids, real stakes. And I was being honored that night at a civic awards banquet filled with corporate donors and suited-up city officials. I hadn't expected my family to show up, but there they were, my mother stiff and disapproving in a pearl-colored jacket, my sister Allison giving tight smiles like she was bored already, and Paul. I set my fork down and stood up. My heels clicked on the polished hotel floor as I scanned the room, trying to breathe. Quick note, before we start, how's your day going and where are you joining from? That's when I saw him. Mark Estrada, sitting alone by the window. He looked out of place like he didn't belong. Older than I remembered, thinner and in a wheelchair. He'd been one of my library kids 5 years ago, always reading comic books, drawing on every scrap of paper he could get. He'd vanished for a while. Word got back that he'd been shot. Wrong place, wrong time. I walked straight past the suits, the tables full of award winners, and knelt by him. "Hey, Mark," I said, "you want to dance?" He blinked up at me, confused, then said, "You serious?" "As a heart attack." He smiled, small, unsure. Then he reached for the armrests and pushed himself up. His knees trembled. He took one step, then another. The music playing in the background was slow, jazzy, nothing special. I didn't touch him. I just walked beside him, step by step onto the dance floor. The room went quiet. People turned. My colleagues stared. I didn't care. Mark and I moved in this awkward little shuffle, barely dancing. But he was upright, and he wasn't invisible. At some point, I saw my mom press her lips together. Allison stared like I'd grown 2 heads. And Paul? Paul looked like someone had punched him in the gut. Good. When the song ended, Mark eased back into his chair, breathless but grinning. Then came Lorraine Estrada, councilwoman, power broker, Mark's aunt. She crossed the room, eyes wet, voice low. "You didn't just lift him," she said. "You changed the room." I didn't say anything. I just nodded, grabbed a glass of water, and headed back to my table. Past Paul, past my mother's silence, past the whole damn room full of people who suddenly didn't know what to make of a librarian. The car ride back was barely 5 minutes in before the claws came out. Mom sat up front, stiff and quiet until she wasn't. "You turned that poor boy into a sideshow," she snapped. That whole room was there to honor real civic work, not for your attention-seeking Jesus, Mom, I muttered. "He walked? That was him, not me." "He walked because you made him," Allison added from the backseat beside me, arms crossed like a courtroom judge. "You don't see how manipulative that looked? You made him into a symbol." I stared out the window, the city lights blurring past. I could still see Mark's hands shaking as he stepped forward, could still hear the room go silent. None of that had been about me, but they'd decided it was. "You knew she'd be there," Paul said from behind the wheel, keeping his voice calm like he was doing me a favor. "Councilwoman Estrada." "That wasn't some accident," I scoffed. "You think I planned that? You think I called her? Asked her to bring her nephew and sit in the corner so I could drag him into the spotlight?" "You've pulled stunts before," Paul said, cutting across my words. "Let's not act like you're above it." That flipped something in me. Stunts? That kid got out of his chair and walked. You were too busy cracking jokes about story time to notice Paul's grip on the wheel tightened. You humiliated yourself. You humiliated us. And you used that boy to do it. I didn't say anything. My stomach was twisting, my fingers digging into the seatbelt. The words I wanted to say didn't come out. Not yet. Instead, an old image shoved its way into my head. Back at the branch, 2 years ago. Thursday afternoon, cold, gray outside. A regular day until we found him. A kid, barely 16, slumped in the bathroom stall, eyes wide open, not blinking. Fentanyl. Policy said we wait, call it in, let the medics handle it. So I did. I stood outside the stall while his friends sobbed in the hallway. I stood there, shaking, sweating, and waited. By the time EMS arrived, he was gone. That's when I stopped following the damn script. That night at the banquet, Mark wasn't a prop. He was someone who needed to be seen, and I wasn't going to stand there and let another kid fade into the background just because it made people uncomfortable. I don't care what you think that looked like, I said finally, sharp and low. I did what I did because it was the right thing. I didn't do it for applause. I did it because he needed someone. Paul didn't even blink. You're becoming a liability, Grace. Allison turned her face away. Mom stayed silent, pretending to scroll through her phone like the words hanging in the air didn't belong to her family. What does that mean? I asked. It means, Paul said, flicking on the turn signal like it was just another workday. I spoke with your supervisor. About your public behavior? I turned to him, stunned. You what? I let her know there are concerns. Media attention, perception. She agreed it needs to be watched. You went behind my back? I warned you before, he said, pulling into the driveway. You keep crossing the line between personal cause and public role. That's how careers end. He parked. No one moved. I opened the door. Cold air hit my face. You crossed the line, I said, stepping out. Not me. Then I slammed the door hard enough to rattle the whole car. I didn't go inside right away. Just stood in the driveway, fists shoved deep in my coat pockets, staring at the cracks in the concrete like they might give me answers. That line Paul threw, a liability, it wasn't new. Not really. I'd heard it before. 3 years ago, I walked into a condemned building on 18th and Lawndale to find a kid named Jasmine. She'd been missing 2 days. Her brother said he saw her head inside with an older guy from the shelter, but the police weren't moving fast. Said there was no solid lead, that the building wasn't secure. So I went. I still remember the smell. Old piss, mold, something rotting in the walls. It was pitch dark inside. I used my phone light, kept calling her name over and over. I found her curled up behind a broken vending machine, bleeding from her lip, shaking so hard I thought she might pass out. She looked at me like I wasn't real. We made it down one flight before the staircase collapsed underneath us. I went down hard, hit a pipe or beam or something solid, cracked 2 ribs and slammed my head so hard I blacked out. Woke up in the hospital. Jasmine made it out. EMS found her on the 2nd floor, still holding my jacket. The press caught wind. Someone leaked it. I didn't say a word, didn't post about it, didn't even tell my coworkers the whole truth. But Paul found out before I even made it home. He emailed me the next day. No, how are you? No, thank God you're alive. Don't blow this up. You're not a hero, just lucky. Keep quiet. That was the subject line. All 3 sentences, no greeting, no signature. I saved the email. At the time, I tried to convince myself he was protecting me, that he knew I'd risk getting fired or pulled from youth services if word got out I'd entered a condemned site solo. That maybe he was just scared. But deep down, I knew. He didn't respect me, not then, not ever. He respected Allison, the museum curator with a published book and a clean wardrobe. He respected Mom because she kept things tidy, predictable, and he respected himself, the guy who turned city planner into a 6-figure consulting gig for developers who tore up the same communities I tried to protect. But me? He saw a librarian who got too emotional, a woman who overreached. I passed my evaluations after the Jasmine incident, even got an internal commendation, quiet and buried. I didn't want attention. I just wanted to keep doing the work. But the tone of that email, it stuck in my ribs longer than the bruises ever did. I pulled it up again that night, sitting at my kitchen table with a mug of cheap green tea, staring at the glowing screen. You're not a hero. I read it 3 times. Then I flagged it, labeled the folder Paul, because I knew even then, history doesn't disappear. It just waits for someone to stop pretending it's not there. The email window was still open when I heard the mail slot click. Just a soft, metallic thunk, barely a sound. But I felt it like a punch. I walked to the door and picked up the thick cream envelope from the floor. Hand-addressed, no return address, no printed label. Inside was a single note card, neat cursive on ivory paper. Grace, I've watched how you move. You don't lead with noise. You lead by showing up. Would you consider speaking to the teens at Renewal House this Friday? Quietly. Just show them what's possible. Lorraine Estrada. No title, no seal, just her name. I didn't tell anyone. Not my director, not my coworkers, not even the volunteers. I took the day off scheduled as personal time and responded to Lorraine by text. Simple. I'll be there. 3 hours later, Paul called. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. Then again, I finally answered on the fourth try. "What the hell are you doing?" he barked before I could say hello. "Good evening to you two," I said flatly. "I just got a call from someone on the civic planning board. You're speaking at Renewal House now? You going to pose as some savior? Estrada's kid got shot and now you're exploiting that." I stepped outside and shut the door behind me so I wouldn't throw my phone through a wall. "I'm visiting kids." "That's it. You knew this would happen," he said. "You set this whole thing up so you could slide into Estrada's orbit. The banquet, the dance, now this. You think this is your platform? My what? You want a campaign? A personal brand? You want to be the bleeding heart librarian they slap on grant brochures? You think I'm doing this for me?" He didn't answer. I said yes because those kids don't care what I've done. "They care if I show up," I snapped. "If that offends you, maybe stop watching." "You don't know what circles you're stepping into, Grace," he said. "You're reckless. And I'm not going to sit back and let you drag our name through the mud." He hung up. The next morning, the headline started. Library hero or reckless risk? Grace Delaney, the story behind the dance. Councilwoman's protege has a troubled past. That one had a blurry photo of me being wheeled out of the condemned building 3 years ago. Another showed the outside of my branch with police tape from the OD incident. They dug, and I knew exactly who gave them the shovel. I texted Jamie, my friend in the city legal office. She'd worked with us on grant compliance. Trusted, quiet, smart as hell. Me, "Hey, can you see who's been in my file? Personnel access? I've got a feeling." She replied 10 minutes later, "Jamie, it was Paul. Last access was yesterday. Full file pulled, flagged with public image risk note." I sat on the floor of the staff break room, phone in my lap, stomach twisted. He didn't just call someone, he went for my job, my record. He wanted me erased, not fired. That'd be too obvious. He wanted doubt, a slow smear. Make me look unstable, too emotional, too involved, not safe. But the problem was, he'd aimed at the wrong damn target. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about the kids, about Renewal House, about Mark walking again, one shaky step at a time. I stood up, shook out my hands, and opened my inbox. I started a new folder, labeled it Paul, Retaliation. Then I moved every article, every memo, every screenshot into it, one by one. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table with 3 tabs open, a cold coffee in one hand, and every nerve in my body wired tight. I started with keywords: Delaney, library outreach, Councilwoman Estrada, youth intervention opposition. I expected noise. What I didn't expect was to find Paul's name in a quarterly report from a lobbying group called Urban Alignment Partners. There it was. Consultant, Paul Delaney, Strategic Development Advisor. They weren't officially anti-youth services, at least not out loud, but buried in their public briefs were buzzwords I knew too well. Mission drift in city-funded institutions, blurred operational boundaries between educators and social workers, elevated liability in untrained personnel engaging at-risk youth. It was a polished takedown, sanitized, professional, but it was aimed directly at people like me, and Paul was helping them shape it. I clicked through their partner groups, found a shared Slack log published in a digital transparency report. Dumb mistake on their part. Someone had pulled screenshots for a watchdog blog. In the images, a comment stood out in a planning thread. Delaney is the symbol. Discredit her, the campaign loses traction. I took a screenshot, then another. I started building a file, not a folder, a case, emails, articles, memos flagged FOIA eligible. Every document that made it clear this wasn't just family tension anymore. This was targeted, coordinated, and strategic. By the 3rd hour, I had over 50 items labeled and tagged. I didn't know exactly where I'd take it yet, but I knew when. That's when the anonymous email hit. Subject: he did the same to me and worse. No greeting. Just a single PDF attached and 2 lines of text. You don't know the half of it. He's been doing this for years. The PDF was a scanned folder. I clicked through each page, heart thudding. Financial statements, divorce filings, threatening emails, from Paul to his ex-wife. Lines like, "If you embarrass me again, I'll make sure you lose full custody. You're not special. You're just a loud woman people tolerate until they don't. This is my city, not yours. It was worse than I expected. Cruel, calculated, like he used kindness as camouflage. At the bottom of the email chain, there was a phone screenshot showing an Instagram post, a photo of me dancing with Mark. Captioned, "The moment that broke the narrative." I hit reply. "Who are you? Why now?" The response came less than a minute later. "Because you didn't flinch?" That line hit me harder than anything Paul had thrown, because it was true. At the banquet, on the call, in the middle of every attack. I hadn't flinched, and that scared him more than anything. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen, not just because of what I'd found, but because someone out there had watched him work the system and waited for someone to stop blinking. I printed the whole damn file. 2 copies, clipped tight, labeled, cross-referenced. Then I walked into the Office of City Ethics with both copies in my bag and a thumb drive in my coat pocket, just in case. No press, no announcement. I didn't even wear makeup. I handed it to the receptionist, looked her in the eye, and said, "This needs to go directly to Investigator Dillard. It's urgent." She took the folder like it was just another lost wallet or license renewal form. Perfect. No eyes on me meant no one could twist the narrative before the facts hit. I walked out of there lighter than I'd felt in years. No applause, just air in my lungs. Then I got in the car and headed west, out to Renewal House. It was an old church that had been gutted and rebuilt inside. Bright walls, floor mats, a scent of sweat and lemon cleaner. Teens sat on balance balls, in wheelchairs, on couches with busted seams. The place buzzed like a hive trying to heal. Mark was in the far corner, halfway through physical therapy. He was gripping a railing, one step at a time, arms trembling with effort, sweat soaked through the back of his shirt. I didn't say anything, just walked to the parallel bars beside him. Didn't guide, didn't coach, just stood there and matched his pace. A young woman in scrubs and sneakers, barely 20 maybe, watched us from across the room. When Mark reached the end of the bars and collapsed onto the bench, she walked over and said to me, "You don't lead. You follow. That's why we move." She said it like she meant it, then nodded and walked off. I sat on the bench next to Mark. He was still catching his breath. "Want to talk to the group?" he asked. "They've been waiting on you." I raised an eyebrow. "Waiting for what?" He grinned. "You'll see." They gathered in a loose circle, a mix of teens, aides, and a couple of tired-looking staffers, sipping energy drinks. I didn't stand in the middle. I just sat like the rest of them. One kid asked, "You the librarian from the article?" I smiled. "Depends which one you read." That got a few laughs. Then I told a story, not about the building collapse or the banquet or anything that make headlines. I told them about the Thursday morning we ran out of granola bars, and one of the regulars offered his only sandwich to a younger kid who'd just lost his dad. I told them about the 5th grader who wrote poems on sticky notes and hid them inside the graphic novels just so someone would find something good when they opened a book. I told them about showing up, no grand gestures, just being there. When it matters, even when it doesn't. Mark waited until most of the others had wandered off, then wheeled over to me. "I used to think I had to wait," he said quietly, like someone had to tell me when I was allowed to try again. He looked up. "You made me realize I could decide for myself." I swallowed hard, looked him in the eye. "Keep deciding," I said, "even when no one's clapping." He nodded once, then rolled away, back to the bars. And I stayed seated, watching. No spotlight, no stage. Just that steady, slow rhythm of people choosing to move. 2 days later, I got the call. The City Ethics Board had voted to reopen the 2017 incident file, the one from the condemned building. They used Paul's own flagged notes as the trigger, the same notes he thought would shut me down. I was told to appear at a closed hearing downtown, City Hall, 4th floor, neutral room, no press. I walked in wearing black slacks and the same button-down I wore for school visits, no armor. Just clean lines and the truth. Paul was already seated. He turned when I entered and froze. His mouth open like he wanted to say something, but nothing came out. Good. I took the chair across from him, laid my hands flat on the table, and looked straight ahead. The board began with the official review summary. Incident, October 3rd, 2017. Subject, Grace Delaney. Action, entered unsafe structure. Result, minor injury, successful recovery of missing minor. They read the statements Paul submitted back then, cold and clipped. Employee acted impulsively. risked personal safety, failed to follow city procedure. They didn't say hero, they didn't say reckless, they just said under review. Then the door opened again. Dana Reyes walked in. I hadn't seen her in over 2 years. She used to work outreach for the local school district. She was there that night in 2017, waiting outside the building, pacing in circles, praying we found the girl in time. She raised her right hand, took her seat. Miss Reyes, you were on site during the incident? Yes. And what did you observe? I watched Grace go in alone, she said, voice steady. I begged her to wait. She didn't, but if she hadn't gone in, we would have lost Jasmine. We would have lost 3 kids that week. That building wasn't just abandoned. It was used for trafficking. There were no protocols for that. She looked around the room. Grace disobeyed protocol because protocol was broken. Nobody said a word. Next, Councilwoman Estrada entered. Straight spine, clean navy suit, no hesitation. She didn't sit. She stood behind the chair and rested her hands on the back of it like she didn't need to get comfortable to speak the truth. If this city penalizes integrity to preserve ego, she said, her voice cutting straight through the silence, we're not saving programs. We're silencing the people they serve. She paused. Let it sit. This isn't just about Grace Delaney. It's about who we allow to do this work. If the expectation is that they keep their heads down, say nothing, and wait for permission, then we're not building systems. We're building cages. Paul didn't look at her, or me. He stared down at the table like it had answers. When it ended, the board said, "We will deliberate. You will be informed of our findings. No decision. Not yet." But I knew something had shifted. When I stepped out of that room, the hallway felt lighter. The air didn't press in on my chest like it used to. Later that night, the news hit. Not the smear blogs, the real outlets. The librarian who stood still. Not a hero, just human. Protocol versus presence. The Delaney dilemma. The photos changed. No longer the stretcher, no more yellow tape. Now it was me beside a book cart, or Mark standing with a cane. For once, the story didn't belong to someone else. It didn't belong to Paul. It belonged to the people who kept showing up. The text came in at 7:43 p.m. Paul, meet me at Oak Ridge Park, near the swings. 10 minutes? No apology, no explanation. Just a place we hadn't stood together in over 20 years. I didn't answer. I just grabbed my keys and drove. The sun was low by the time I pulled in. Streetlights hadn't come on yet, but the sky was fading. Streaks of orange and purple bleeding into the tree line. He was already there, sitting on the old metal swing that used to creak like it was alive. Still wore that same too-tight dress shirt, like he couldn't ever really clock out of being important. I walked up and stood across from him. Didn't sit. He looked up at me, didn't smile. "You could have torched me," he said. I shrugged. "You tried first." He nodded like he couldn't argue that. For a second, all I heard were the leaves rattling in the wind. Then he spoke, softer than I'd ever heard from him. "I thought if I kept you small, I'd feel bigger." He looked down at the gravel. "I thought you were a threat." I blinked. "Let that land." He went on. "You kept doing things that didn't make sense to me. Getting hurt for kids who might not even remember your name. Turning down promotions. Choosing chaos. And every time you stood up in a room, I felt like someone was noticing you more than me. I crossed my arms, not defensive, just holding myself in place. You don't have to be special to be good, I said. You just have to show up. He nodded again, then exhaled. I'm stepping down from the advisory board, he said. Told them this morning? I tilted my head. Because of me? Because I don't belong there anymore, he said. I used to think I was the solution. Now I think I've just been part of the noise. He let the swing sway forward an inch, then back. I don't know who I am outside of control, he admitted. That one hit different. He finally looked up, really looked. Do you hate me? He asked. No, I said firm and even, but I'm done waiting for you to respect me. We held that silence for a long moment. Then he stood. He looked around the park like he half expected to see us as kids again, chasing each other in Sunday clothes, arguing over whose turn it was to push the tire swing. But there was no rewind button. He took one step back, then another, and when he turned and walked away, I didn't follow. I stayed planted, feet in gravel, hands steady, eyes clear. Let him carry his own weight for once. I left the park the same way I came, alone and clear-headed. The next morning, the formal invitation landed in my inbox. City Hall cordially invites you to the presentation of the City Restore Medal recipient, Grace Delaney. I read it twice before closing the laptop. Didn't forward it, didn't share it. I didn't need anyone to clap for me, but I showed up. The room was small, just a meeting chamber off the second floor. Beige walls, folding chairs, lukewarm coffee in a dispenser that probably hadn't been washed right. Nothing polished, nothing grand. Perfect. About 50 people filled the seats. Councilwoman Estrada stood near the front, holding a small velvet box in her hand, like it weighed more than it looked. I wore my usual, dark pants, flats, and a clean navy cardigan. No podium, just a microphone clipped to a stand and a low buzz of people murmuring before it started. Estrada stepped forward without notes. Some people restore buildings, she said. Some repair streets. Others write policies or crunch data. She turned to me. Grace didn't restore systems. She restored dignity. She opened the box and held up the medal, small, silver, nothing flashy, then pinned it to the left side of my chest. The applause came slowly. No whistles, no standing ovation. Just real hands clapping real thanks. I didn't stand to receive it. I stood because I no longer needed permission to stand. In the back of the room, near the door, I saw him. Paul, alone. He didn't speak, didn't move. But he nodded. Just once. I nodded back. Nothing more. That was all there was left. Estrada stepped aside. Would anyone like to speak? Silence. Then a quiet shuffle. Mark. He walked up slowly, favoring his right side, a cane in hand. No chair, no wheelchair, no push from behind. Just steps. Uneven, but his own. He took the mic, cleared his throat. I didn't walk because she pushed me, he said. I walked because she saw me. He stepped back. That was all. But then another teen, a girl I hadn't seen in almost 2 years, came up. She sat with me when my brother got arrested. Just sat. No questions. She stepped aside. Another kid. She let me write rap lyrics in the margins of my homework, said it still counted as writing. Then another. She showed me I mattered before I believed it. And another. She didn't fix me. She let me try. They weren't rehearsed. No one handed them a script. They just came. One by one. Some spoke. Some just stood there. Some cried. I didn't say much. I just nodded. Listened. Watched the ones who used to sit silent in the back of the library walk forward without waiting to be invited. There was no big finale. No music. No spotlight. Just voices and steps. And the steady beat of people remembering what it feels like to be seen. We cleared the courtyard behind the library just before sunset. No banners, no speeches, just strings of paper lanterns swaying overhead and an old Bluetooth speaker blasting Sam Cooke like it still mattered. People came, not hundreds, just enough. Kids, grandparents, volunteers. Some in wheelchairs, some with braces or bandages. One guy came in socks because he forgot shoes. Nobody cared. I wore jeans, a faded hoodie, and sneakers with dirt on the soles. Didn't bring a purse. Didn't bring anything except myself. Mark was already there, standing tall with his cane, spinning a girl who only had one leg and a prosthetic that clicked every time she laughed. They stumbled, caught each other, laughed harder. It was messy and beautiful and completely real. I stood near the entrance, leaning against the brick wall, sipping a paper cup of orange soda. My knees ached, my shoulders were sore. And still I felt light. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him. Paul, standing near the edge of the courtyard, just outside the ring of lantern light. Hands in his pockets, shirt untucked, face unreadable. He didn't step forward, didn't wave, I didn't smile. I just met his eyes and let him watch. Let him see it. The beat kicked back up. Something older, louder. Feet shuffled across pavement. Someone let out a whoop, then a cane clattered to the ground. Before it could hit, a teen jumped forward and caught it midair. Everyone cheered like he'd hit a game winner at the buzzer. That was the moment. I stepped into the circle. Mark turned, reached out a hand like it had already been decided. This time, he said, grinning, we dance for you. I shook my head. No, I said. Tonight we dance for us. And we moved. Not perfectly, not on beat, not even close, but fully alive. The lanterns swayed. The music spilled into the street. And for once, no one tried to fix anything. We just danced.